So we're going to start with our little Q&A session. We're going to go Senator Hagerty with you first. You're in your second year at Congress, second year in the U.S. Senate. In terms of comparing your second year with your first, how do you think things have been different or changed over the course of those 2 years?
Well, if I look back to this month a year ago, August of 2021, Afghanistan had just fallen. I was in the midst of what I'm doing this month, which is my annual economic development tour. I had to cut it short. I went to the Memphis airport, and I flew to Europe. I met with our ambassadors at NATO from Turkey, from Italy, from Great Britain, and from Germany. They were absolutely furious with us. Those 4 countries were responsible for the on-the-ground presence in Afghanistan. The United States of America was responsible for command and control, the overarching targeting operations. The United States of America pulled out of Bagram and let them know after we were gone. We left them and their citizens behind. We left American citizens behind. That cut and run episode damaged America's credibility around the globe. And I was the first person, and to this day, maybe the only person from the United States government in a senior position to show up. And I think a lot of you here that run companies know this. Showing up's a big part of leadership. They were absolutely furious, but I listened to them. I let them vent their concerns, and their concerns are very legitimate. We left $80 billion worth of military equipment on the ground. We created a void. We don't know what's happening over there except that the Taliban is running things. We know Al-Qaeda is back there now. And after they spoke, after they talked about it, I reminded them of this. As unhappy as I am about the fact that we are in the position we are far better off working together than apart. And we all agree that that's true. I think it's absolutely incumbent upon us to find ways to work with our allies, to recognize problems when we create them, and to own up and be responsible for moving forward. They appreciated my presence there. You know, I came back, I stopped in the UK as well. I met with the defense minister there. I met with the head of the Foreign Relations Committee there. The one person I couldn't meet was the Minister of Foreign Affairs because he was being sacked to take responsibility for Afghanistan. And the only person that's been in the United States who's gotten in trouble for Afghanistan is a lieutenant colonel who suggested that somebody at the top of DOD should take responsibility. He went to the brig for that. So we've got to find a new path and a new way. And I think that looking forward, that destabilization has definitely changed the world this year. Because from the point in time that Afghanistan fell, Russia dramatically stepped up its presence on the Ukraine border. China dramatically increased the number of sorties that it began to fly into Taiwan airspace. Kim Jong-un is back in business again, launching into the Sea of It's been unbelievable around the world how destabilizing that event is. So things have definitely changed over the past year, and not for the better.
So, Congressman Fleischmann, a lot of changes in the last 2 years. You've been in Congress for 12 years now, since 2010. Can you explain how the dynamics have changed in your more than a decade in Congress?
Certainly. Thank you very much. I want to thank the Chamber for doing this wonderful event. And Senator Hagerty, it's been a privilege to work with you. I thought that you were going to be an outstanding senator when I supported you, and you have fulfilled in every way possible. You are a true gentleman. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Congressman Fleischmann.
2010, I go to Congress. And I stand and I look out at the House of Representatives. We were in the majority then. And I felt so privileged to have the ability to represent the people of the 3rd District of Tennessee. What did I know? I knew I was dealt a very good hand. I got great constituents. Chattanooga, Tennessee, Oak Ridge, Tennessee, all the way up and down wonderful East Tennessee counties. What happened? I got there and I realized this. If you have your heart right and your head right, it's a lot like sports. I'm very competitive. If you do your work, if you work tirelessly and you've got your heart right, you can get things done. The biggest thing I found out in Congress, yes, it's gotten very polarized and there are problems, that if you step up and do the right thing at the right time and you're ceaseless, you don't give up, you can get things done. I'm going to give 2 very quick examples because I know we have a lot of questions to get to. We knew when I came to Congress that the Chickamauga Lock was not getting funding. Now, the reason it was not getting funding is earmarks had dried up and it was basically subject to a trust fund that was not basically going to fund this lock. I worked tirelessly, and I thought that was going to be an easy lift. It wasn't. It was the hardest thing I ever got done. For 5 years, there were no funds on that lock, and we worked and worked with administrations, with senators, anybody who would listen to me. Just a couple years ago, we got full funding for the Chickamauga lock. So sometimes the easy can be hard. But conversely, if you're doing the right thing, the hard can be easy. Bill, perhaps you saw last night, I was outraged when Homeland Security announced a few months ago that they were going to have something called a disinformation board. Now, I don't think Homeland Security or any government agency should have a disinformation board. I believe in the free exchange of ideas, wherever you are on the spectrum and the like. I did not think Homeland Security could do that. So I got to work, and I thought this is going to be near impossible. Last night, Homeland Security announced that they are not going forward with their plans for the disinformation board. Thank you. Thank you.
So we're fortunate enough to have both of you here today because it's the August district work period. Senator Hagerty, you and I were talking beforehand. You've been in Linville, you're here in Chattanooga, heading to Knoxville tomorrow. What are some of the predominant things you've heard around the state and in your travels during this period?
I think the overarching concern that I'm hearing, and again, this is my economic development tour, so I'm going to job sites, I'm going to companies, I'm talking to employers, I'm talking to employees, and the concern is that we have real labor force issues here in America. I think about the incentives that were created during the pandemic shutdown. A lot of people re-examined the way they want to work. A lot of people retired. And it's been quite difficult to get people to come back into the workforce. And as they come back, people want a more flexible scheduling option. Well, that may work in some environments, but if you own a restaurant, if you own a manufacturing firm that needs to keep running on a continuous basis, that's very hard to change the scheduling environment. So I think that our employers are being met with exceptional challenges from a workforce standpoint. I've spent a lot of time talking with Governor Lee about workforce development opportunities, getting our young people trained for jobs that matter, the jobs that will be here for tomorrow. Mayor Coppinger's here. We've worked together on these issues. I mean, Chattanooga's been growing dramatically, but think about the types of engineering needs and technical needs that companies like Volkswagen need here in the area. We've got to be able to make certain that our workforce is ready for the jobs of the future. That effort's going to continue. I think the other thing, though, I'm hearing a lot of is real concerns about supply chain. The fact that companies can't get critical elements in their supply chain means that there are a lot of items that they can't complete, orders that they can't finish, a lot of funds tied up in inventory because they can't move the product out the door. I think nowhere was that more evident to me when I went to see the first Cadillac Lyric roll off the line over in Middle Tennessee and Spring Hill, Tennessee. And as they were making a big press issue and a big splash about the new cars, there were a field of vehicles from last year that are still sitting there because they can't deliver them because they don't have the semiconductor chips. So I want to share with you a bit of good news, and I hate it that I have to be the one sharing it with you, that you're not seeing it spread all over the news media, but it's because we were in agreement and it makes sense. So it's not newsworthy, I guess, in the eyes of the Washington media. But I guess it was about this time last year when I was doing this economic development tour, I'm already hearing about the chip shortage and the impact it's having on supply chain. So I began to call up the CEOs of semiconductor chip manufacturing firms around the planet. And I asked them why they weren't manufacturing the chips here in America. We design them here in America, but we don't make them here. And every one of the CEOs gave me a list of reasons, but all of them said this: Bill, it takes between 5.5 and 6 years just to get a permit for a semiconductor chip fabrication facility. 5.5 to 6 years. If you think about the rate of technology development in that arena, by the time the permit is delivered, they're already on to the third generation. Why should it take longer to get a permit than it took us to win World War II? But that's the bureaucracy in Washington. These facilities are multi-billion-dollar facilities. You can spend $50 billion on a chip fabrication facility. They are huge. They use a lot of water, a lot of electricity, a lot of chemicals, therefore a lot of permits. And the way things work in Washington, at least the way things did until last week, is that you've got to clear one gate before you go to the next. All of these handoffs between agencies lead to lots of time. So what did we do? We put in place a fast-track permitting process that takes that 5.5 years down to 18 months. That makes us competitive as a nation. And you know what? After meeting and visiting with my Senate colleagues, they all agreed with me. We passed it unanimously. A Republican drafted the legislation, passed it unanimously through a Democrat-controlled Senate. We passed it through the House of Representatives with Congressman Fleischmann's help. We had over 300 votes in the House. Again, a Democrat-controlled House. It wasn't an easy fight. The environmentalists came after us for reasons that I still don't understand. But the president signed that bill just this past week. We will be competitive as a nation again to attract semiconductor manufacturing to our shores, making those supply chains stronger, more secure, making America a better economy. That's something to be proud of.
Congressman, I know you've been traveling the district this month. What are you hearing as you go up and down the eastern part of Tennessee?
Thank you for that question. Obviously, I live in Hamilton County, which has 350,000 residents. The new 3rd district will have all of Bradley County and a total of 10 counties. One of the great things about it, and one of the reasons I do serve, is because I'm an optimist. But I'm also a realist. So listening to managers of plants, going up and actually speaking with line workers on the line, there are concerns out there. First of all, clearly inflation. That's one of the issues that has been on the minds and actually in the real world for hardworking East Tennesseans. But there's a genuine concern about the way in which our country was going. Now, there was in 2010 when I was elected. That is genuine wherever we go. Having said that, I want to go out and spread a message of hope and optimism and the like, and talk about the things that we've got going for us, not only in our great state, but in our country. Just this week, I was in the West Side, and I spoke with folks that in a community, some of which had given up hope. And I don't want any American, regardless of where they live, if it's in inner city Chattanooga, if it's in rural America, and when I represent a lot of rural counties, or if it's in a more privileged area that is done well economically, like Chattanooga or Hamilton County, or Oak Ridge, where we have $7.3 billion of investment, and we're leading the world. Think about that. We are leading the world in supercomputing and materials research, in fission and fusion research right up the road. So what am I hearing? I'm hearing concern, but what am I spreading? I think that's probably the better thing. Spread words of optimism. We can be down and we can address things in a negative way, but when you go in and we speak with people who really believe in this country, and I'm going to say this, new legal immigrants to this country, I've met several in many of the factories, outstanding men and women, and guess what? They love the United States of America. They want to share in the American dream. They don't want socialism. And if they can believe in this great country, we can basically go back and have that type of a renaissance as well in our hearts and our minds. So thank you.
Senator, you heard the congressman mention inflation. It's an issue across the nation and in Tennessee as well. What are some ways that you think Congress can help blunt the impact of inflation on the general public?
Well, the biggest driver of inflation are policies coming out of the current administration. And it started on day one of this new administration when they came in, basically killed the Keystone XL pipeline, forbade drilling on federal properties, whether they be offshore or onshore, re-entered the Paris Climate Accord, which basically ties our hands and puts us at a huge disadvantage relative to where we were. You know, we were energy independent. Gas was at $2.11 on Election Day, November 2020. We're a far place from that right now. The Europeans love it, right, because they were at a disadvantage. Their energy policies have already gotten them into trouble. But I tell you who loves it even more. That's China and India. China added more more coal-fired energy plants last year than ever before. So as we take ourselves out of the equation, other countries just step up with even more polluting resources than we take offline. So that one move to wage war on the domestic energy industry here in America had the effect of raising energy prices on a global basis. These are global markets. Inadvertently, I don't think the Biden administration intended this, but inadvertently, that price increase has funded the entirety of Vladimir Putin's defense budget that he's used to wage war on Ukraine. We are subsidizing Vladimir Putin's budget because of the massive price increase that he's been able to experience and benefit from. And in the meantime, we've seen our nation go through massive inflation because every good that we sell in America has to be moved. Except now diesel fuel's above $5 a gallon. You know, you think about energy costs up in the Northeast, more than double. You think about fuel oil, things of that nature. People in Tennessee have to drive to work. You know, our costs have been elevated dramatically, but if you look at the core of it, it has to do with our energy policy. I think that is the most obvious thing to turn right around and fix, because what we did from the beginning from January 2021 to this point is we've sent a message into the marketplace that if you invest in the oil and gas industry in America, you're not going to get any return on that investment. So refineries aren't being invested in. Exploration is not being invested in. Pipelines aren't getting permitted, so therefore they're not getting the investment. We are becoming weaker as a nation every day, and inflation is going higher as a result of it. That's the most obvious fix for us, and that's where I'm going to remain focused, is to try to get us back to a point where we can be energy independent again. I'm not against any energy source. I want America to be at the lead for everything. I want, you know, nuclear, what an advantage for us right here in Tennessee. I'm not against any of the other sources, but rather than dramatically subsidize sources that are going to be actually more dependent on China, I'm thinking about battery technology, I'm thinking about rare earth minerals that we need to develop these, I'm thinking about where the solar panels are largely made, where the wind turbines are made. We're making ourselves more dependent on the Communist Party of China every day that we move in this direction, when we could be energy independent right here in America. So I think that should be our primary focus to address inflation. It also will make us more secure as a nation.
Congressman Fleischmann, what about you? So in terms of congressional ways that we can maybe blunt the impact of inflation, what ideas or solutions might you offer?
Well, first and foremost, I think we need to take a look at where the Federal Reserve Board is. We have more of an advisory role in terms of what we can say, but one of my concerns was I think the Fed rightfully had to raise interest rates and probably will have to do that to curb inflation. The administration, which I disagree with on a lot of issues, was finally candid about the fact that they got knocked back on their heels on the inflation issue. Treasury Secretary Yeltsin basically said, look, we didn't see it coming soon enough and we reacted to it too late. And I think that's accurate. I think what we need to do is basically make sure that the Federal Reserve stays in its lane. What we've seen, in my view, too many times, including with the Fed, that they will venture outside their lanes into other areas that might be better well left, and I think are better well left for either other government agencies or governmental bodies, like the legislature. I want them to focus on the money supply and those issues because it's so critically important that they get the fiscal part of that right. The other thing that we've got to do, when I went to Congress, the national debt was $15 trillion. It is now exceeding $30 trillion. There's something inherently wrong with that. So at some point in time, what we need to do, I think, as a nation, is step back, and I venture to say this, in a nonpartisan way, not even in a bipartisan way, and look at those root causes. Everybody in the room, whether they're on the right and the left, knows what's driving those debt issues, but nobody on either side of the aisle or in either White House, I've been through 3 White Houses now, want to tackle that issue because of the volatile political nature of that. But I will say this. I love to go into schools, and I love to listen to students because they've got the best questions, they've got the best hearts, and most of them can't vote. So you're in there, and it's almost, you're very free in a very existential sense. We are and they are. But the questions they ask are incredible, and I want to give them hope because they're our next generation, and I want them to believe in our republic. But when I go in and I speak with students, we are not doing a good enough job. In fact, I think we're doing a poor job talking about basic economics. We need to talk about supply and demand. We need to talk about the fact that it is a great thing in America that a business has somebody put capital at risk as an entrepreneur and makes a profit and pays taxes on that profit and reinvests that and has philanthropy and all of the wonderful things that have come from the free enterprise system. Right now, that is something that is just not even present or on their agenda. I think if we do a better job there and a better job in the halls of Congress, basic economics 101, we can work to curb inflation.
Senator, you talked about the CHIPS Act, and that's something that the chamber was very much in favor of. Take us through a little more detail about what it takes to get that bipartisan legislation actually across the finish line in a unanimous way.
Well, my legislation was unanimous in the Senate. The CHIPS Act was not. It took a lot of work to get that done, and frankly, I was not one of the initial people that was in favor of it because of the size of it. The fact is, nobody likes to subsidize industry. You know, no one likes to pick winners and losers. The problem that we've got is we don't have a level playing field. China's doing subsidization, Europe's doing subsidization. If we want to compete, we've got to acknowledge that reality. But I came on board with that legislation. As I told them, it was clear they had the momentum to get it passed. But I said, this legislation, spending $52 billion of taxpayer money to subsidize these industries, only makes sense if we can do it rapidly. Not on a 5- and 6-year timeline, which is where we would have been if we hadn't fixed the permitting. I mean, by the time those monies are deployed, again, we're off to the 3rd generation. China's pulling ahead further. So I teamed up with them, helped them pass it, voted with that, because I wanted to see my legislation come through and at least make it make sense. So taken together, the acceleration that my permitting process does, and my permitting process picks no winners and losers. This is an advantage for the entire country. Anybody can come and build a semiconductor plant. You don't have to be in this state or that state. But paired with the CHIPS legislation that put the subsidies in place, it will make us competitive and it will make those dollars spent much more efficient, much more effective. So I think that is going to be a shot in the arm. I'm very concerned about China, their national security implications that drove me to support the Subsidy Act. There's a large amount of money that's also authorized, but not yet appropriated for research and development. And I think, you know, Congressman Fleischmann and I, both as appropriators, are going to make certain that any dollars that get appropriated are going to be done in a way that deliver a clear return on investment for the American taxpayer. This isn't going to be just a slush fund. This is something that we're going to make certain that is deployed in a responsible fashion. But the goal, again, is to make America more economically secure, and that will support our national security as well. We cannot find ourselves in a situation where we're looking east, where China is in a position to put a chokehold on the supply of semiconductor chips. And if some adverse action were to take place, that would create a serious recession here in America. It would probably create a global depression. We need not find ourselves in that position. This was a way to fix it.
Congressman, from your perspective as a member of the House, what did it take to get that legislation across the finish line, that bipartisan piece of legislation?
I'm glad you asked that question. The House, and particularly every Republican, myself included, in the delegation, took a little bit different view on that. I like Bill's thought about as appropriators, and I'm so thankful, Senator, that you decided. The Senator got 4A committees, but was kind enough, at my request and the request of a lot of people in our great state, to join the Appropriations Committee because, as we all know, I'm the lone member of our 9-member delegation in the House. That's not only important for Chattanooga and Oak Ridge, but for our state, and it's actually allowed me to touch so many things. So, Senator, thank you for joining me on that key Appropriations Committee and venture. I think what we really need to do, looking forward, getting it passed was one thing, making absolutely certain as we go through the appropriations process that we tweak it so that we do not incentivize the Chinese in any way, shape, or form. That if this is going to be a domestic endeavor, we want it to be a domestic success.
Senator, the congressman mentioned your committee assignments. You're on some powerful committees: banking, housing and urban affairs, appropriations, foreign relations. What are some of your goals that you'd like to accomplish through those committee assignments?
Well, I can remember the conversation I had with the president and with several other people that were calling me from my last position. I served as the United States ambassador to Japan before I came into the United States Senate. And that role was a tremendous honor to represent your nation to another nation. I couldn't recommend it more highly. It's a tremendous honor to represent your state in the United States Congress, as Congressman Fleischmann and I both feel strongly. But from that role, I had a very unique perspective. Japan has the largest deployment of U.S. military anywhere in the world. Why is that? It's because it's a very tough neighborhood. You've got North Korea, China, and Russia right at your doorstep. had a massive intelligence operation there. I saw and learned things, and as the senior American in the region, I had a lot to say and do about how we addressed and dealt with China. I'm extremely concerned about China. In fact, it's my #1 concern from a national security standpoint. My feeling was coming back to serve would help dramatically in terms of understanding that and moving our nation in a way that would help address that threat. The other thing is this: there are not many business people. I'm the only diplomat, the only former diplomat serving in the Senate, but there are not that many business people serving either. And I think it helps to have somebody that's signed the front of a paycheck as well as the back of one that is serving there, someone that's lived under the regulatory regime that is, so prevalent in Washington. But I've been investing in companies and helping them grow for my entire career. And you mentioned I'm on the Banking and Financial Services Committee. I've invested in banks, served on their boards. I've been in the insurance arena. I've been in the reinsurance arena. I served on the board of directors of the largest commodities firm in Chicago. I've actually had deep experience in these markets, and I think it helps to have that type of experience present when pretty challenging and technical issues come up. It also helps just to have common sense. I can remember Chairman Powell of the Fed saying in February of 2021 that, well, we think this inflation is transitory. I said, sir, it's not transitory. This is real. In April, he said the same thing. I said, I can assure you it's not transitory. It is real, and it's here to stay. When wages go up, they don't come back down. You think about some of the problems we've seen in the supply chains that would be transitory, but there are very real elements of this. And when you have an energy policy that this administration has imposed that is aimed at killing the fossil fuel industry by 2030, I guarantee you it's inflationary. So those sorts of perspectives, I think, are very helpful. Finally, Chairman Powell agreed with me that this isn't Putin's price hike anymore. That got a lot of play, probably several of you saw it, but I asked him, what has been the major driver? We saw inflation, below 2% in January of 2021. By the end of that year, inflation was north of 7%. Did Vladimir Putin have anything to do with that? No. That had to do with policies that we've been executing here in America. So we need to acknowledge that, and we need people with common sense that will just call it out. And I think that we've got to just continue to inject that type of business-like perspective as we look for opportunities like I did in fixing the chip problem. Just continue to have a practical, pragmatic approach. Congressman Fleischmann, one of the most pragmatic people that serves in the Congress too. That's why we work so well together.
Congressman, you mentioned your role as an appropriator, and we know how powerful a role that is for our region and state. What are some goals that you'd like to accomplish as you go back to Congress?
Well, thank you. And let me say, Bill is spot on right on China in every facet, whether it's in foreign relations, currency, economics. I've traveled the world. You're absolutely right. They are our main competition. So thank you for saying that. That is omnipresent in our world. When Senator Alexander, in my very first term, on an airplane, sat with me and said some very kind words to me. He said, I've watched you, I've worked with you. He said, we need a partner. Tennessee does not have anyone on the Appropriations Committee. And he said, you're bright, you're energetic, you work tirelessly. I would like you to become an appropriator. And I summarily asked why, because I knew that was going to maybe make me have to take some very difficult votes within my own conference. Let's face it, sometimes I'm the only member in my conference voting for an appropriation bill. But I had the district with Chattanooga, Chickamauga Lock, and Oak Ridge within $4 billion, now $7.3 of worth of federal investment there. So I said yes. And he told me something that day that still rings true today, and I want to try to tie this in. He said, how many times do administration officials return your phone calls when you call them? Well, I summarily told the senator, never. And I was telling him the truth. He said, you go on the Appropriations Committee, and I guarantee you they will call you back that day. So then the late, great Senator Baker was still alive, and he was a constituent up in Scott County. I went to see him. And he said, Chuck, there's two things in the world I don't understand. The United States House of Representatives and the Middle East. But he says, I think I do understand appropriations. You need to do that. So I went on to that committee. And now, because I am a senior appropriator, big difference of being a freshman back 10 years ago on that committee and now a senior appropriator. I sit on 3 key subcommittees. In the minority, we're only supposed to have 2. I have 3. Am I a glutton for punishment? No. I'm a workaholic. I represent exemplary people, so I want to give exemplary service to my constituents and to the country. The great news about the Appropriations Committee, and I know Bill has sensed this as well, we literally touch everything. So it's not uncommon, and I will tell you this, for administration officials, and that's whether it was the Obama administration, the Trump administration, and even the Biden administration, just to come by my office, cabinet officials, and talk. Now we know, let's face it, there's not a lot of common ground there. But when there is, we want to seize that opportunity. And I have done that time and time again because of my role as an appropriator. Finally, this is so critically important. Our federal budget now, in 1980, was 25% mandatory spending, 75% discretionary spending. Today, that's flipped around. So, the drivers of our debt, the vast majority of automatically reoccurring dollars on the federal side are the mandatory spending programs. Social Security, Medicaid, interest on the national debt, Medicare, most of the Affordable Care Act. That is automatic. What does that mean as an appropriator? That means that Bill and I have to be very smart in the way that we address and assess that 25% of the budget that we can still control. Where do we have that federal investment? As a senior appropriator now, I can make sure that Oak Ridge wins. Of the 25 functions that a national lab performs, we're doing all 25 now. Now, you might sit in Chattanooga, Tennessee and say, why is that important? It's great for the state. It's great as a recruitment tool. But a few years ago, I worked to make sure through our great partners, not good partners, great partners at EPB, that we forged a relationship between the great city of Chattanooga and the great city of Oak Ridge. The benefits of that have been tens of millions of dollars, but in terms of the different things that we are doing in the state, it's phenomenal. So to answer your question, right place, right time, continue to build, continue to work with people with whom we agree and with whom we disagree. Okay? It's great to be passionate. I'm a conservative Republican. I'm very strong in my views about that fiscally and socially, but we have got to govern, and that, I think, is our key role. And I like the idea of what Bill has said. He and I are business people. We're both very pragmatic. We're very principled. And I would say at times I'm a little bit more ideological than most in my conference, but that's okay. You just have to be, in my view, to be able to make that transition sometimes from ideology to practical governance. Thank you.
You know, Senator, you've each talked about talent attraction and workforce development, and those are 2 key issues for the chamber and key issues facing Chattanooga and Hamilton County businesses. In what ways is Congress working to address this issue from your perspective?
Well, it's an issue that I know, Chuck, you're hearing it every day. I do as well. The question is not whether you have job openings at your company, it's how many you have. I was just speaking with a friend here today, earlier in the audience, who's got more than 20 nurse openings that she's trying to fill. I've got another company here in Tennessee that has 150 visas that are stacked up trying to get qualified nurses in from overseas. We're looking for anything that we can to try to fix problems in the short term. They call it the Great Retirement that took place during the pandemic. A lot of people just said, look, we're not coming back. We put in 20, 25 years, whatever the number might be. They retired. We need to find ways to bring those retired workers back into the workforce. I've been asking my team, find a way, whether it's double counting Social Security, I don't care what it is, but let's find a way to incentivize highly trained people to come back. And every one of you that meets a payroll knows this. You bring in 2 or 3 brand new green people, they're not as productive as a person that, you know, may be 55 years old and decided to retire early. So let's find a way to create an environment conducive to bring them back in the first instance. The nursing shortage is something that really impacts particularly some of the hospital operations that are managed out of Middle Tennessee. We have hundreds and hundreds of visas that are stacked up right now overseas of trained nurses that would like to come here. I told because I sit on the Foreign Relations Committee, because I formerly was an ambassador myself, I told the person that has just been seated as the U.S. ambassador to the Philippines that she's on my speed dial. And I've got a call set up with her next week to go through case number and name. Here are the people that we're waiting to get into our country. I know you guys took a 2-year vacation due to the pandemic. Get back to work and get these visas processed. These are just short-term fixes, though. We've also got to create an environment here in America where young people are trained in the soft skills of showing up on time and of appreciating the promise and the dignity of work. When you look at what the value of federal benefits and state benefits are for not working, employers tell me that they're competing against the government more than they are against other companies, because the choice of not working and making, I'm picking a number, $12, $13 an hour versus going to work for 15, a person at the entry level sometimes doesn't make the right decision. We've got to convey the promise of a future to young people. I want to be as optimistic as Chuck here. The promise of a great America. We need to be able to let them see the dignity of work and what a difference that makes. And as a person who grew up, at a different time in America, I grew up at times my father didn't always have a job. I can tell you from firsthand experience, having a job, having a good job for a family fixes so many other social ills. And I think if there's one thing that I can do serving the United States Senate, it's to continue to create an environment here in America where we're the best place to invest capital in the world. And when that capital investment happens, that begets economic growth, it begets good jobs, that will make our nation stronger. And it needs to start with kids at middle school level, high school level, but encourage them and engage them to see that promise.
Congressman, what about you? What's your perspective on ways that Congress can help with the talent attraction and workforce development issues?
I'm glad that you asked that. A few years ago, when I was in my infancy in Congress, I had maybe served about a term, it was in my second term. I was looking for an issue in the 3rd District of Tennessee that we could maybe all come together about. We all know about the polarizing issues. We read about them, we see them on TV. And Bill's absolutely right. It was workforce development then, and it is really workforce development now. But there was one key element that I was seeing firsthand. I went up to TCAT in Athens, and Tennessee has long had a wonderful vocational training program. And at that time, I was watching people change oil. Now, I have to confess, I am the most unhandy person in America. I was pretty good with a book, but not too good with a screwdriver. Well, they had me change oil with them one day at the TCAT. That was not a pretty sight. But as I was covered with oil from above, I bound with those wonderful men and women there that day. And we had a talk. And that talk went something like this, and I was sincere. I said, you all have such a tremendous skill set, whether it's working on cars or computers or electricity. This is truly outstanding. You have 98% job performance. You know the saddest thing that I heard? Not one of those persons in that room, not one of those people in that room, told me that they'd ever been told that they had a valuable skill set. And that's outrageous, and it's wrong. And what I did, I said that day, let me come back and speak at your graduation. And I did that. Now, I've spoken with graduations literally all over the 3rd District, and I love them all. That was the most touching time ever, because what we need to do, Bill, you're right again, in the elementary schools, in the high schools, we need to do that in our communities, is say, just because you have a different skill set, okay, when my tire goes flat or my lawnmower is broken, as it is now, I can't fix it. I just am literally useless. But people with these great skills are coveted. There are great jobs out there. There's great careers. But please, let's not stigmatize that. Let's idolize that. And let's go out and make sure, whether you're good with a book like me or good with the screwdriver, anywhere in America, that you basically cherish that job set and uplift these people. We need them right now more than ever. So, thank you.
So, Senator, we talked a lot about policy. Congressman Fleischmann just mentioned being good with a book. So for the last question today, I'd like to know, what's the best book you've read in the last year?
I'll share that with you, but I'd like to say just one thing, if I might, before I go to that. I had the great privilege of serving our state as the Economic Development Commissioner. I know many of you from that role. Jim, we worked so closely together on a number of things, and I worked with Congressman Fleischmann then. But I just want to underscore what a privilege it is to represent a state whose economy is doing so well. It's precious, though, and it wasn't always so. When I came into my job as Economic Development Chief in January of 2011, I want you to remember this. Tennessee's unemployment rate was above the national average. Our wage growth and our GDP growth were below the national average. Tennessee was in the bottom half of all the metrics. We were handed a $1.6 billion budget shortfall, a budget deficit that we had to address. And by the way, the budget that I was handed from my department had been expended 130%. I didn't know you could do that in government. A business person coming in, like, how in the world did that happen? But we turned things around, and we turned it around fast. I restructured my department. I eliminated over 40% of the positions in that department. And I changed the structure. Rather than have everybody sit in Nashville in the ivory tower dictating how things should happen around the state, I sent a team into the field. We went to a regional structure so that our team could be working with local leaders and with local companies to help them figure out how to expand and grow. And then I started flying all over the world. 4 years later, when I left that job, Tennessee had the unprecedented position to be the first state ever named the State of the Year for Economic Development 2 years in a row. No other state had ever had that happen. When I left, Tennessee was #1 in the nation for creating jobs through foreign direct investment. And if you look at where we are now, Governor Haslam, Governor Lee have continued that. Tennessee is at the forefront of having a great economy and having great economic figures and great growth. We did it here in Tennessee. We're going to keep doing it here in Tennessee, and it is such a privilege to represent a state like this. So I just want to say thank you to all of you for working with me back then and for giving me the opportunity to represent you now. On to the book. This is a book that I first read when I was 23 years old. I was eventually sent out to work in Asia and came to appreciate it as I reread it again when I was about 28 years old. I lived in Asia for 3 years, and that helped me understand a lot of what was happening then. It's a book that I gave to my oldest 2 sons when we moved back to Asia when I went to serve as the ambassador to Japan. It's a book that my oldest son came to me last summer and he said, Dad, he was working on a project having to do with assessing what China was doing with regard to the Taiwan Strait. He said, Dad, it's all in here. It's a book that I just reread again about a month ago. It's a 2,500-year-old text. It's called The Art of War by Sun Tzu. And I would recommend anybody in business read it. Anybody that's interested in what China is doing right now, read this book. It'll take you just a couple of hours. It's about this thin. But that's the book that I've just finished reading, and I would recommend it to everybody here.
Congressman, other than the lawnmower repair manual that I know you're reading, what's the best book you've read in the last year?
Well, thank you. And again, Senator Hagerty, thank you for your tireless work, cooperation. We have 2 great senators in our state, and you have really, I want to tell everybody this, I have a lot of friends in the Senate, many of whom I've served with previously in the House, and just some new friends that have gotten there over the years. Senator, you are doing our state proud. Thank you, and God bless you. Reading. I came to this job, thank goodness, with a very strong Christian faith. It has actually gotten stronger. So I looked at that question. I've been reading the Bible an awful lot lately, and I need it. I really, really need it. And that has been really a strong source of inspiration for me because the world is a dangerous place. We have seen, and I have seen, and sadly been actually present at some events that were literally horrific in nature, in root cause, and the like, in a very broken world. So having said that, I do want to say this. Jim Coppinger, I want to thank you for your outstanding service as county mayor, sir. It's been a privilege to be with you and serve with you. And on the other side here, my new friend is Tim Kelly, the mayor of the great city of Chattanooga. Tim is a very learned man. We had dinner a few months ago, and I thought we were going to talk about the city and politics. We ended up talking about Plato and Aristotle and Cervantes. And the reason I segue into that, Tim, is on the book, in addition to the Bible, I've written 3 novels. And I have a penchant for fiction. in many ways because I like the flexibility and license that fiction gives. If you write nonfiction, you darn well better get it right or you're going to get spanked. But with fiction, I can have some fun with my characters and kind of focus on the optimistic side. So I've written 3 novels. I hope to get them published. 2 are actually ready to go. But I think it's just very important that whatever your gift, for me it's writing and on occasion speaking, but whether it's the arts, I think we need to go out and the arts and music and the humanities and or vocational. I think my message today is what it was 10 years ago, is make sure that we go out and develop the great potential that we've got in this city, in this county, in this state, and this nation. Thank you.
Well, gentlemen, I want to thank you both, not only for being here today, but on behalf of the Chamber and our member businesses, I want to thank you for your services to the state and to the country. Thank you so much.
Thank you.